Basically, why I wanted to come here is that I wanted to share the work that we have been doing on the invasive apple snails. They originally were called as golden cohort. I think everybody knows about it. In the Philippines, it's very famous. And the second purpose of my coming here, which is more important than my presentation, is that I'm also looking for people who may be interested to work on this particular species of snails, because I'm preparing an inter-country project which is definitely not going to be funded by the Philippines but from outside source. And I'm looking for people. I know a lot of people who have been working on snails in the Philippines, like Dr. D. Lara. She has been working for a very long time on apple snails. And there are other people like, some of my former professors, they have worked on snails, they have trained people on snails. So I'm touching back to look for those kind of people who are interested on not only on the taxonomy of snails, but also more on the management of snails. So my presentation today is just going to be very brief about what are the new challenges. Why do we have to study apple snails when it has been studied for such a long time? So there are a lot of challenges, and the good thing is that there's nobody at IRRI, at the International Rice Research Institute, who is really working on this problem. Now, last week I was in Singapore. We launched our book on apple snails, and the IRRI Director General was surprised to look at so much work is being done, and he was saying, how come there is nobody from IRRI working? And every scientist you talk to IRRI who are working in outreach projects in the Asian countries, the snail is a big problem. So, it's especially why it's becoming a problem and what are the new challenges. That's what I'm going to talk about today. The first invasion of apple snail was in the northern part of the Philippines, when it was found that it's causing a lot of damage to rice. So from that time, my former professors who are also no more here with us, like Dr. Ravindra, she did a lot of work on apple snails. We were looking at botanical pests. So I want to magnify, I want to move forward the good work that they had done and look at new paradigms on how to manage snails in rice ecosystems. So I'm affiliated with the University of South Pacific in Fiji as an adjunct professor, and I also connect with other, like I'm an associate of CABI from the Center for Biosciences International, which is based in Malaysia. So any proposal that I write, I can submit it to CABI, and the CABI can look for funding for us. So, so currently I'm doing that process of writing a proposal for external project. This is an inter-country project. This includes Asian countries, including even Spain, Europe, and also South America. This is the structure of my talk. I'm going to talk a very little about introduction to invasive species, what are the global, regional, and national impacts, the global information online databases that are commonly available now, and the global review on invasive species, and a little about my book that we have published, and what are the new challenges, and then global partnership and collaboration. The last two are the most important for me because they will help us to decide on who would be networking with us. And I must tell you, even if a person is retired, can still be a part of the network. So it doesn't mean that you have to be active in such. Anybody who has interest on snail or who have worked on snails are welcome to join this project. So invasive species, they are exotic species, they are not native to their, and they are introduced for either for two purposes. Either deliberately they are introduced, like say for example, the invasive apple snail was introduced to the Philippines as a food, so it was a deliberate introduction. But there are also invasive species that are accidentally introduced to other countries through various multiple pathways. So the invasive species, they come in various groups, various sizes. They are present geographically, they are present from poles to the tropics, and they belong to different taxons. This is some of the invasive species from different groups, as I was talking, of different shapes and sizes. And invasive species, they're not only in agricultural ecosystems, they are in every kind of ecosystems, either in terrestrial, aquatic, and these are some of the examples. This is one of the courses that I introduced as a visiting professor at UP Baguio. It's a 3-unit course on Bio 197. There was a new course that was introduced, and this course is still ongoing now. And these are some of the invasive species that the students have developed good databases. So if you go to Baguio, you ask in the library, the good databases about these invasive species belong to, whether it's a medical invasive species, whether it's an agricultural, or whether it is the sea or freshwater ecosystems. So as I said, invasive species, they become problem. They come in different kingdoms. It can be animal kingdom or plant kingdom, and they become invasive because they have no predators in the new areas. And secondly, they have no competitors, and they have no parasites and pathogens that affects the invasive species. They use multiple pathways. Like say, for example, they can use so many multiple pathways. That's what makes them invasive. Like say, for example, in case of snails, I have seen the snails have been transported from one province to another province, like in flooded areas, like in the boats. Their eggs have been sticking, and so the snails are being transported to different. So there are different pathways. So I've just listed the different kind of pathways that causes the invasive species to spread across. These are the common characteristics of an invasive species. I'm always taking the example of one of the most widely studied species, the golden apple snail or golden cohort. And they, as I said, they are very few natural predators or competitors of parasite. They have highly productive ability, and they have high tolerance. They have high tolerance to different environmental conditions. When I was visiting international exchange scientist under JSPS in Japan, I studied the populations from the tropics and the temperate areas. And at the end of the 10 months, we found out that there was no difference between the two. So they could easily adjust to high temperatures as well as to low temperatures. So they can adjust to different kind of salinity levels. So they are very adapted. They are very easily adjusting to the different environmental stresses, and that also makes them very invasive. What are the global impacts? The global impacts are remarkable for invasive species. If you look at it, the global cost of invasive species are around 1.2 million species. 1.2 million species, they cost around 1.4 trillion US dollars. About 5% of the global GDP. So you can imagine if you are working on any invasive species, whether forest invasive or agriculture invasive or marine invasive species, the amount of impact that you are making and the amount of funding also is easily available when you work for invasive species. When we started work on cohort, I started with only around 150,000 pesos, and today I don't even take enough money coming out from other sources because I said I cannot do everything by myself, so we need more people to work. So that's why I restrict even the amount of funding that I can get for, especially for invasive apple snails. I just want to give you an example. There's a very big project of CABI in Commonwealth, the Center for Agro-Biosciences International. There's a very big project which shows that they are working in 6 African countries, and they are only working on weeds very important 5 major invasive weed species. Like you have them here, like Lantana camera, the Parthenium, the miles, and those 5 species, they are so serious that that's such a big project in the whole of the 6 East African countries, and it's causing around 1.1 billion losses. You know, when I attend these invasive species seminar, they are looking for people to collaborate. But you know, so I was telling, there are a lot of good people that are got. I'm very happy that Dr. Dilara has arrived.
Sorry, I had a class.
A while ago I was telling that my coming here is to make a presentation because I'm making a very big inter-country project proposal on invasive apple snails. And so we are looking for people who are experts on snails. So thank you for coming. And in US itself, because in other countries, the thing is, why other countries are able to get a lot of money for invasive, because they have quantified the losses. But in other Asian countries, even not only Philippines, even we talk about Malaysia or Indonesia, the policymakers, they don't want to give you money because they ask how much loss is causing. So we do not have enough data about major invasive species. For snails now we have done some work and we know how much loss is going. I'm going to show you a little later. So the magnitude of loss from invasive species is very high compared to other natural disasters. Look at it, it's very simple. In the US they have characterized the losses from the invasive species, from plants, from mammals that are invasive species. They've characterized it. How much is caused by a zebra mussel or an Asian clam, how much losses are there. So this is the kind of information we should have for easy to get funding. Otherwise, the policymakers all say, why should I, how much loss is causing, how many millions? So we cannot, it's hard to get funding when you do not have this kind of data. So invasive species are the second most important after habitat destruction. This aside from the other areas. So invasive species, they cause around 49%, which is next to the habitat degradation. This is some of the information that is also very critical to know the extent of biodiversity loss from the invasive species. Now you see, if you look at this database, this information, it clearly shows, you have to identify also which are the top priority invasives for example, in Southeast Asia. So these have been identified under the ASEAN Network Initiative. Dr. Sotiko was the main person who was involved in this, as well as the invasive species global database of the IUCN. So we have categorized, these are some of the worst invasive species that are found in the Southeast Asia. And of course, our apple snail, the invasive apple snail, is being included in that list. This is the kind of information we need. We have, for the Philippines, this information has also been available. What are the problem invasive species in forestry, agricultural, and in aquatic ecosystems? So this is the kind of information is very useful. And here it also shows some of the species that are invasive in the forest areas are also important in agricultural systems. So we also need to look at cross-sector invasiveness if we are looking for making a project on invasive species. These are some of the invasive species which are aquatic invasive species, and this gives examples. Aside from fishes, this also shows in which of these ASEAN countries these invasive species are common. So when we make a proposal, just like that's why it's very important that our chances of getting funding for the invasive apple snail project is very good, because many of the ASEAN countries have similar problems. So we are addressing a regional problem. We are not addressing a country-specific problem or a location-specific problem. So this is the kind of information that we have collected to generate for our proposal. So they're also very important. If you identify a species, that if it's invasive or not, you also look at different type of global databases. So this is one of the databases. We have a very good ASEAN database, which is here based here in ASEAN Biodiversity Center. They have a very excellent database, which is on the first one. It gives the information about invasive species that are present in the ASEAN region. But the good thing of this data, this is the only database in the world that has multilingual. For example, you want to get information in Filipino, you just press the button there, Philippines and the Filipino language, everything comes out in Filipino, not in English. So these databases are very important for us to review when we are making, so in the Philippines, they have reported around 138. But if you look at the Global Invasive Species, GISP, Global Invasive Species Database, which is by the IUCN, it indicates in the Philippines 148. So I think what in the Philippines we have done a good job, because our database approximately matches with what is there in the Global Invasive Species Database. And you must always consider, if it is listed in 100 worst invasive alien species, then the chances of funding are also very good, because they are the key problems that are listed in 100 invasive species. This is the ASEAN database. I talked about it a while ago. This is the CABI. Now the CABI has come out with the Center for Agrobiosciences International for all invasive species. This is a compendium. There's a compendium on the invasive species compendium. So try to contribute your information into this compendium, because then it's easy to network with people around the world. All our work on invasive apple snails, including some of the publications of the Filipinos, is already in the database. Like say for example, we want to know what work Dr. Dilara has done, it's already in the database, it's included in this database. What work did Dr. Belendra Jesus did before on management of snail, it's all in this database. So it's free of charge. All these databases are free. You can get them online, you don't have to pay anything, and they provide a very useful information. And there's an update going on. You look at it. The first time, Dr. Lissinger, who was at Irrigated, he prepared about the Pomacea caniculata. At that time, it was called golden apple snail. And then, later in 2003, I reviewed it, and then on 2013, Dr. Robert Garvey improved on the. As new information comes in, these databases are being revised. So this is a very useful database. So everybody who is working on invasive species. The other database which is very good is the invasive species, IISG, Invasive Species Specialist Group. This is also includes also, if you look at this, it includes information on invasive species of the month. So you can get every information about what are the invasive species, new invasive species in different countries. So this is very useful. And all of these databases are free. What I'm showing you is all of them. The Global Invasive Species Database, which is under the IUCN, also includes information. And it is very easy to use. You just type the common word. You can search by author. You can search by different subjects. It's very easy to maneuver these databases. So I'm going to talk a little about the invasive apple snail, because this is where I want to make sure that the inter-country project will come in. So these snails were introduced from the South America, and they have been introduced basically for three purposes. One, as a food. Second, they came as an aquarium pet. And third, in some countries, they were introduced for biological controls for aquatic weeds. In some of the countries, they were used for, so these are basically the three. The main purpose in the ASEAN region is they were introduced for food, not really more of an aquarium pet. But if you look in the US, in Florida, in Texas, and in Georgia, they were introduced as an aquarium pet. So they came with the aquarium trait. And now they have invaded so many countries because of the multiple pathways that they follow. And one of the recent is in Pakistan, which is on the left side of India. You see a dot there. Now Pakistan has been invaded by, and they were introduced along, not for food in Pakistan. They were introduced, they came in the aquarium trade. So now the future of invasion in India, Bangladesh, and is very serious. Because what we have seen is when we analyze using the climax data, we see Australia, India, Bangladesh are at very high risk. Because the climatic data shows that it is very favorable for this snail to invade. And if it invades India, and it will, because you need a very strict quarantine procedures there, and they use so many multiple pathways. The biggest problem in India would be because India is the highest producer of rice in the world. So you know the whole rice production, and this is what I was showing in Singapore last week during the book launch. So we have to make sure that there is, and as you see, they are listed in the 100 worst invasive species under the IUCN, the World Conservation, but it is mentioned as golden apple snail. That's what I want to point it out, because we will say why. I will talk to you a little later, the problems that the use of that term has caused, and why in the future the golden apple snail will not be called golden apple snail, called invasive apple snails. If you look anything that was done before 2008, when we identified snails based on the morphological characteristics only after the work of our group with Dr. Robert Covey and Haynes, we found out in the South American snail that has multiple origins. Now in the Philippines, if you look at also in Philippines, both the species are present, Caniculata as well as Maculata. But if you look at the morphologically, just by morphology, it is very difficult to identify. Even a good snail taxonomist cannot identify. So using molecular approaches and using other approaches, now we have been able to know. So most of these records, the new records now, after 2008, clearly shows which countries have either one species or both the species. And as you see, in most of the Southeast Asian countries, both the species have been introduced. But in terms of damage, there is more damage from Caniculata. Lot of distinguishing characters has been identified recently now, how to differentiate it based on based on the shell, based on the anatomy, and as well as based on the eggs. But these are also very variable. These are just an early indication to identify the two species. So the two species really have to be done, aside from the morphological characterization, or the anatomical or the phylogenetic data, you also need to do some molecular analysis to look at the differences. So you see, this is what is happening. There, like in Cambodia, it was identified even by Robert Covey before, when he went to Cambodia as an expert to the Cambodia project, Australia project, invited Dr. Covey to identify what's the snail problems that they were experiencing, very serious snail problems in southern part of Cambodia. So he went there. There's a very good report that he wrote. At that time, he identified it as caniculata. But only after the 2008 work with him and other people that we work together, the correct name, the correct species there in Cambodia is maculata. So there's a lot of misidentification that has happened in the past because of we did not have enough information, we did not have enough type materials, we did not have enough new techniques to identify the two species. Just like in Vietnam, you see, it has been identified as Pomacea, which is mostly found in Australia region, and these are not pest species. Ritzy is not a pest species, but in Cambodia, in Vietnam, both the caniculata and maculata are present. So what we have done now is we have developed country reports. Except Philippines, we have not written yet our country report, but all other country reports are ready. Some of them have been published, and by January, most of them will be published in different journals. So what we are doing is we are preparing for. I said the strategy there is. Yesterday, we were attending the EU, the ASH 2020, and the lady was telling me there, you have a very good strategy because you have a country reports for each of these countries. So when you submit a proposal, it's easy because you know people, you have already networked with people. So what I'm currently doing is producing this network, having publications with different snail experts in different Southeast Asian countries, including Spain, because I'm a senior advisor on apple snails for the government of Spain. So what we are doing is we are having these country, so that when we prepare the submission of the proposal, these country reports will be in the appendix so that we can show we have network, we have people in different countries, because it's going to be a huge, at least 5 to 6 years project. It's not going to be 1 year. And in each of these countries, these will be the country coordinators that will manage the project. So this is our idea. Now look at this, there's a confusion in the use of the term golden apple snail or the channeled apple snail, because like in the US, like in the Texas, they call channeled apple snail. But you see, both of them are having the same name. So that's why the use of golden apple snail is not the correct, because we are dealing with two different species. So, and secondly, we are using with a lot of misguiding, like the giant African snail. The abbreviation we are also using is GAS. For golden apple snail, we are also using GAS. So the use of those abbreviations and the acronyms or use of the common term is not applicable. From all future publications, we'll be using the word invasive apple snails. So there is a species confusion. I said there are two species that are introduced to Southeast Asian countries, not only Pomacea but also caniculata. But one or both of these species have become widely established in many parts of Southeast Asia. Like, say, for example, if you talk of Cambodia, most important species is maculata. So, in case of but P. caniculata is more widespread in Southeast Asia, while P. caniculata, maculata is less widespread. What are the impacts? In fact, Philippines is famous for the work on apple snails, on invasive apple snails, because there's so much has been done compared to our neighboring countries. So, if you look at the snails, they are causing around 28 to 45 million US dollars annually in the Philippines alone, and in the global, it's around 55 to 248 billion per year. So it's a huge amount of losses. And I'll later show you, it's not only the crop damage that is causing a problem with this snail. We are also looking at a new dimension now about the snails. I'll talk a little later on that. And the important thing is that it's very easy to manage snails in transplanted rice, because we have done so much in this that you don't even need to use any chemicals to control snails in transplanted rice. But in direct seeded rice, this is one of the biggest problems, because the snail cannot differentiate between the rice and the wheat, because both are very young, so it eats everything. So I have been working on direct seeded rice for a long time, but I usually work in Japan and in Europe on direct seeded rice, because it's very difficult to manage snails in direct seeded rice, because when you control water, like in transplanted rice, very easy, you control the water depth, snail will bury inside the soil and sleep while the rice is growing big. Then you really put a lot of water, the snails cannot eat the rice because the rice is already very high. But in case of direct seeded rice, it's very complicated. You have no water, weeds will grow up, more rats will come in, and when you release water, the snail will eat the rice, not only the weeds but also the rice plant. So the losses from the direct seeded rice is immense. And this is one area. If you want to become famous, this is one area to focus on. How to develop a good technology to manage snails in direct seeded rice. I have some few good research that we are doing, but it's still, it's still, we are fine-tuning some of those methods. The second area that is very serious in case of snails, which has been barely studied, not only in the Philippines, in the whole of Southeast Asian countries, including in the US, because snail invasion in the US is very serious now. That's why I'm working with the University of Texas. I am a consultant to the University of Texas on this apple snail. The problem of these snails is very serious in Texas, because the size of the snail there, because it's maculata, the old name is insularin. The maculata is very big. So when they're harvesting rice, it goes into the machine and it destroys their machines. So there are indirect damages also that is caused aside from the crop damage. But one of the biggest problem of the snail, and that's where the funding agencies are very interested in funding, is a cross-sectoral research. They're not too much worried only about food security, but also human health, farmers' health, farm workers' health, because of this parasite. It's a rat lungworm parasite, which is becoming a very serious problem with the change in climate. Like in China, the outbreaks of this is very, very serious, and usually you get this parasite when you eat raw snails. And in many places, people eat raw snails when they are not properly cooked. And secondly, you can also get that if you have some wounds and then you did not wash your wound properly, this parasite is a serious problem. The other effects of this parasite, because of using a lot of toxic chemicals in the past, a lot of people have been losing their nails. And even I have seen other countries that they showed that in the International Rice Congress, that like you look at Republic of Dominican Republic. In Dominican Republic, people are also losing their snail, their Philippines, we have got rid of the arsenic compound. But in other countries, they are still using it, and the animals are losing their home, and including the farm workers, they are using their toenails and the fingernails. So there are a lot of effects on the side effects of using molluscicide. This slide is very important. This slide, there was a lot of, when we did this work many years back, you see the slide below shows that if you treat the rice at a seedling at a pre-germinated state, look the one that is untreated and look what is we treated with molluscicide. You see, so when you treat with a molluscicide, what happens is a certain kind of molluscicide, which are commonly used even in the Philippines now, until now, you see the germination is affected, the root and the shoot left is affected. So what happened? It exposes the plant to a longer attack from the snails. So it's like to publish this paper, it took us a lot of time, because a lot of opposition was from the big multinationals. because they said no, they haven't seen it. But finally, when we did we repeated this thing around 15 times, and then Erie published this paper because they have seen all the data. And now you will be surprised to know, even in my earlier book on snails, that chemical company said, yeah, they are seeing that kind of symptom. So if you are working, for a farmer, it's very difficult to know what he's spraying because he sees the dead snails, but at the same time he doesn't know what's the effect on the plant. So we did some work on this, and this work is now recognized, and now we are looking for safer products. This is a kind of phytotoxicity, that may any phytotoxic effect on the plant. So now the new compound that we are developing, a new kind of molluscicide that we are preparing with the University of Texas, is we are looking at product which has few important characteristics. One is that it should be fast acting. Second, it should be very specific only to snail. So that's why the new product that we have, now we have just submitted our application to EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency of the US. So they need voluminous data, carcinogenic, skin irritability. So we have done everything for the last 7 years. So we've been working on this project with the US for 7 years. And until now we have just submitted the application. So what I'm saying is this product is so unique. It's in the form of a granule. Second, it's coming from a plant-based origin. Not all plant molluscicides are safe, but this product, what we have identified, is very safe to fish, it's very safe to frogs, it's very safe to earthworms, it's very safe to non-target organisms, and it doesn't cause any phytotoxic effect. So that would be the future. We have already applied for patents now for the product, because before we launch it, we want everything to be make sure we have the patent, because otherwise it's very easy to copy what we are doing. It is usually known whenever there's an invasion by invasive apple snail, the native snails are decreasing in number. But nobody has done extensive studies on this. This is another area that we need to look very carefully in our project. How does it affect? Does it affect because they are feeding on the same food resource which is causing the decline, or is there any other mechanism? So this is one of the things that we also want to study because it relates to the environmental issues. Then there are different methods that have been promoted. Then this is what I want to show you, very simple thing. This is what Erie did many years back. They introduced in so many countries for transplanted rice. Okay, but many of the methods, old options, they are very labor intensive. They are not economical. They are not sustainable, and many of them are harmful to the environment. So we have to think in a new way on the managing snails, on direct seeded rice, and this, Erie spent a lot of money on this globally. Even in the Philippines, we had a very big campaign on this, done by DA, but when we did a survey, I did a survey after many years, after 8 years of their project that was implemented using the NFE approach, the non-formal education system approach of this, informing farmers. So I said to Phil Rice, I think it's better we evaluate. I knew, because I was still seeing farmers are doing what they were doing before. They would easily buy a pesticide rather than doing other hand picking or. So we did a very good survey, and we actually presented this paper in Australia in a mollusk conference. And therefore what we showed, we were able to look at the radius of 100 kilometer radius of field rice, and we interviewed farmers of what they are doing currently. And you'll be surprised to know that still the use of molluscicide was #1. When in fact, this focus of the project was all about using non-chemical approaches to snail management. So why is the farmer still using it? So that's where we found out that some of the methods, they were not economical, they were very laborious to do it, and they were also not sustainable. You know, we came out with the information. This is the first book that was published in 2006, 2007, and then there's another book which has recently been published, and it's about the new species. The first book was from when I was still with Phil Rice. The second book, I was not with Phil Rice, but Phil Rice, I'm surprised, they funded the whole project, printing the whole book. I had me, Dr. Covey, and Dr. Sebastian. We have prepared we have edited, we are 3 editors in this book. So none of us are connected with Phil Rice, but the Philippine government was kind enough to fund the whole book for printing, but all other costs, we took care of it. I want to give you a simple, this was the launch of the book in Singapore last week with the International Rice Congress. There were more than 3,000 people around the world, and we wanted to use this as a strategic launch, because when we write our funding, we also can tell how many people, because some of the funding agencies were there. So we have to impress on it why we need a funding to work on a global basis. We are not only looking at the ASEAN region, but looking at the global. So our networking is very good, and the launching was very strategic. Again, I emphasize there why the new book. It's not a revised version of the book. It's altogether a new book. And there we talked about, you look at these 2 species, they're all, both of them, you think there's 1 species or 2 species? Huh? But you see, if you use only molecular characterization, you will only know that these are 2 different species. And this is one of the recent work done with the Indonesian snail expert. She's a lady. She's very good on snails. And this publication, as a country report, this is a part of the country report of Indonesia, and it is going to be published in this year in the month of December. I showed this slide a while ago. There are differences. That's what I highlighted to them. That's why we need to intensify the research in the Southeast Asia. Again, the change of common terms. And this book, the new book, consists of 3 parts. There are 3 sections in this book. One is, it talks about the general aspects of the snail biology, the first part. The second is, there are country-specific reports. These are new reports, like report from Ecuador is new, report from Pakistan is new, report from Myanmar is new, which were not in the earlier book. And these are new invasions. So this includes the second part of the report. And the third part is on the management and use of apple snail. So this is new knowledge, altogether new knowledge in the third part. And the third part talks about how you, for example, snail shells are now used in Malaysia as a catalyst for biodiesel production. So, you know, we want to look at the snail from different aspects, from agriculture sector, from a medical sector, from an industrial sector, and as well as for the food. But like, so for example, in Korea, you go to Korea, South Korea. In South Korea, there's so many restaurants on invasive apple snail, the same species which is a pest. They are as food recipes. So this is, you know, we're looking at different dimensions. There are, the first part of the book is about the general aspects of biology. It includes on the snails. And there are 9 chapters in this book addressing this part. And of the 9 chapters, there are 21 authors that have contributed. So most of the chapters here are multi-author. You see, that's what we need. We need a chapter that is written by multiple authors, so that we get the whole overview rather than having bias. So there are 21 chapters, and they are coming from these 8 countries where it's blinking. The second is the country-specific reports like Pakistan, Myanmar, Sabah. There is a lot of problem now in Sabah on this thing, and of course in the US. There are very, very new invasions in the US. So there are 8 chapters with 29 authors and 7 countries. And the third part is on the management. There are 5 chapters, 17 authors, and 6 countries. Like say for example, in terms of the use as an aquafeed, there's a very good paper by Christine Casal. She is a Filipina. Very good paper. She used to work for World Fish before, and now she is not working. But I said if the project is approved, she will be also a part of this global inter-country project that we are writing. So this is the total coverage of the book. You can see the total coverage is there are 22 chapters with 67 authors from 17 countries. So it's a global coverage. So this is what we want to emphasize to a funding agency, that we are not alone. We have a network. We know there are state experts. So in the Philippines, we have not yet finished the country report of the Philippines. If anybody is interested, they can follow it. And in the country reports, the people from the respective countries, they are the senior authors. I would be the last author, because we want to make sure that when the project is approved, they have a leadership role in that project. These are some of the challenges that I discussed. I said there are 2 things that we need to do: address on the direct seeded rice and flood-prone areas for managing of these snails. Pesticide concern and the health concerns, I've already talked about it. And you know, this book, one of the things that I told Phil Rice when they wanted to publish my book, I told them one thing. I said, you want to publish a book, no problem. I can help. I don't take any royalty from them. I don't receive a single cent royalty. But I said, one thing you have to do. You have to provide free access to the book. A PDF copy, anybody can download. A student can download it, and it takes only a few minutes to download the whole book. Because I think it's very expensive to ask people to buy books. So it's better. We want the knowledge. We want the things to move forward. We want to remove the barriers. So now the book is available as a PDF copy on the website. But if you go to Phil Rice, if you want to ask for a copy, printed copy, they can give you. But they have also limited copies. I think they only printed around 1,000 copies. But most of them, I think, have already been sent to different countries where the state is a problem. But you can still try. You can write to them, or if you visit there, you can get a free copy. Of course, I have 1 copy for Dr. Dila. I have 1 for her. So the others who are interested, yeah, because she's a snail worker, so we have worked together before, so we know. And also on my research gate, I have downloaded the copy of the snail. And the third one is Dr. Robert Scavi at the University of Hawaii. This also there. And most important is the Cabi species, invasive species comparative. The whole book is now on the comparative. Even the chapters, they have individually indexed it. So they asked me to sign an agreement that we have no objection. So I told Phil Rice, you know, since Phil Rice is the publisher, they should also sign, I'll also sign. And now the book is freely available. So if you look at ResearchGate, more than 1,700 people have already downloaded the book. You look at Phil Rice's website, more than 900 people have downloaded the book. So you see, and a lot of people are writing to us on how they can collaborate in the project. So you know, the networking has been done is very good now. I think only thing is that I'm doing is now sitting down, talking to different funding agencies. I have my idea. I think one of the ideas that I have seen here is that Bill Gates is interested in this. Why? Because he is not interested about talking too much about rice. He wants to say, he's asking how is going to help the farmers who get infected with this kind of disease. How do people get infected with this kind of, and how to manage these things. So I think he is very, I'm making some initial talk with Bill Gates Foundation already on this aspect. So possibility of getting funding is very high. But it will take a little time because we have to prepare the whole conceptual network or proposal. This was the course I was telling you that I introduced in UP about when I was a visiting professor in UP Baguio, the selected topics in biology, especially on invasive species. So there is a lot of evidence, and if you look, to my surprise, many of the students, whether they are in medical science, they are studying about more on invasive species. Like say for example, one is studying about dengue, so he is doing medicine now. Another girl is studying about leptospirosis. So this introduction of this course at UP, because I used to teach there as a visiting professor for 1 year, and there so I think in most of this, the vice president of the UP academics, Dr. Concepcion, formerly Dr. She was telling me, Ravi, I think we have to introduce in all this UP system this course, because it's very, we have to go with the upstream. What I mean is the new paradigms, that there are only 4 paradigms now in science, if you are coming from agriculture or so one is everybody should link his work to climate change, whether you are studying biodiversity or identifying new species. Second is you need to look at invasive species. Third is you have to look at food and nutritional security. And the fourth one is the biodiversity loss. So I think these are the 4 paradigms that any research proposal that has this will, of course, most of these have to drive with the UN Sustainable Goals, the SDGs. If it doesn't translate to those, then no funding agency is going to give us money. So that's what I'm now, while I get some free time, I always read the SDG, I see which of the project, our state sub-projects will fit in which of the sustainable goal, because you have to justify in the proposal how this is benefiting the sustainable development goal of the United Nations. This is now, there is a perfect storm. Talaga. If you are dealing with invasive species and climate change. I tell you, very simple now. A lot of countries, especially now you go to Vietnam, almost all the parts of Vietnam are heavily infested with apple snails. Secondly, they have gone now, 90% of the area is planted to direct seeded rye. So everybody is asking what to do about this, because there is so much loss because of the flooding. See, climate change related. So you have to link. That's why I am now currently also a consultant with IRRI on 2 projects. One is on the heirloom rice project, where I work in coordinators. The other one on the climate change program with Dr. Sebastian as my boss there. So we are looking at how different kind of climate change drivers are affecting different crop pests, not only in rice but also in other crops. So Earth is getting warmer, everybody knows that, with global climate change. So you can expect changes in the ecosystem, in the distribution of plant and animal species. There will be shifts on that, and then this is going to favor invasive species, because the invasive species usually colonize areas where there is disturbance. Like you see, if you go to Pampanga, now you see all those the sugarcane fields, they have been infested with talahib. This is an invasive species because of the eruption of the mountain Tubo. What happens? There's a shift in so the new species come in and they colonize areas which are disturbed. So it's easy for them because they have more resilience. They are more adaptable to different kind of environmental stresses. And of course, it happened. And the last part of my slide is very important. This is what we need. This is what I'm doing now. And this is the way I think we all have to think. We have, if you are dealing with any invasive species, whether it is invasive apple snails or whether it is Lantana camera or whether it is the bullfrog, whatever invasive species you are dealing with, no single country can address because they have similar, like for example in snail, you think Vietnam can manage the whole snail problem by themselves? No. So we need, there are enough synergies now available at the regional level, at the national level, and at the international. So we need to exploit that. We need to embrace that and form collaborative partners with different countries across sectors. That's what I'm saying. The snail research, that the snail intercountry project will be cross-sectoral. It will deal with the Ministry of Health, it will deal with the education sector, it will deal with the industry sector, it will also deal with the agriculture sector. So it has to be a cross-sectoral and with different stakeholders, not only universities, but even NGOs or even other UN organizations. So we will have all of them included in our proposal. Thank you so much.